up, everyone? Welcome back to Knicks in 4, where we talk everything Knicks. I'm your host, Ayers. If you're new to the channel and you're enjoying what you're watching, please feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, share a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's get into it. So, at the end of the regular season, teams are always faced with incredibly difficult decisions to make in terms of who they would like to keep and get rid of on their roster. And in today's video, what we're going to be talking about is who the Knicks should specifically keep for the beginning of the next regular season and who they should ultimately decide to let go, whether that be in a trade or potentially cutting them or what have you. Now, what we're going to do today is take a close look at the starting lineup and discuss who exactly we should keep and who we should exactly get rid of. Now, as you may notice, there are only 4 out of 5 players in this rotation here that we're going to discuss. And the player that's missing from this rotation here is none other than Jalen Brunson. Now, I think it's pretty obvious why Jalen Brunson is not going to be included in this video today, and that's because he is Mr. Untouchable. Jalen Brunson is not going anywhere. There's no need to discuss the status of him being on this team. Hell, I believe they're pretty much erecting a statue of him in front of the Garden right now as we speak. So Jalen Brunson is here to stay for the foreseeable future. So what we're going to do today, guys, is talk specifically about the 4 other starters, that being Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, and Quentin Grimes. Now, the player that we're going to start with first is Quentin Grimes. Now, Quentin Grimes just finished his second year in the NBA, so he's still a very young player, and he has established himself in his early NBA career as being a two-way player. He's very smart. He knows how to move. He knows how to make the right cuts on the offensive end, and he prioritizes defense. And Tom Thibodeau loves him some Quentin Grimes. Now, we know if Tom Thibodeau has an affinity for you, you will get minutes. And this year, again, his second year in the NBA, he was moved into the starting rotation, which is huge considering that Tom Thibodeau is not really a fan of giving rookies or young players that much burn, especially to begin their careers. So that's how much respect and admiration that he has for Quentin Grimes, and deservedly so. You know, Quentin Grimes has a lot of the DNA that we need, on this team. And we're going to talk specifically about each of these players' strengths and weaknesses. I'll get to that in a moment. But Quentin Grimes is a player that has a very good floor. I don't want to say he has a high ceiling, but he's the type of player that he can thrive on any team. You put him anywhere, any team, any roster in the NBA, and he can make a role for himself. Now, this year in particular, I remember, or maybe you don't remember, that he started the year dealing with an injury, and I believe he missed about the first 10 games or so, and it was a bit of a struggle for Quentin Grimes to get his footing back, to get his shot back. In fact, his three-point shot was pretty much inconsistent the entire season, although we know that Quentin Grimes is his arc, his form is pretty solid. So in terms of his shooting, I wouldn't be so much worried, especially if, there are fans out there that think that maybe he is not that good of a shooter as once advertised, especially looking at him in his first season. I believe during this offseason, he'll have time to, work on his game. He won't be dealing with an injury that derails players here and then there. But I have confidence in Quentin Grimes. But let's take a look at Quentin Grimes' strengths and weaknesses so we can make a more objective decision on whether we as the fan base should actually decide on keeping him or dumping him. So looking at Quentin Grimes' strengths, we can see that he has solid length. He has good athleticism, a quick first step. He's a two-way player again, as I mentioned. He has adequate size to match up guards on the perimeter physically. He has elite basketball IQ. He is a tough box out for leaner guards and wings. Now, in terms of his weaknesses, he's not a shot creator and he struggles on his offense. He settles too often for contested shots, struggles to get separation due to poor ball handling, and he lacks the touch to get floaters, runners, and layups. So obviously, Quentin Grimes has some things that he needs to work on. But again, him being a 2-year player into the NBA, he still has a lot of room for development. So I wouldn't be so much worried about Quentin Grimes, getting all of this together. I believe these are all things that, if you're giving yourself a little bit of time, you spend, an offseason working on these things, you can easily implement that into your game. The things like defense and stuff like that, he has it already. He has all the nicks and crannies, or whatever you want to call it, that defines a good NBA player. So if he works on those few things, I think he'll be fine. And the other thing is that he's on the cheap now, right? So 3-and-D guys don't necessarily grow on trees. And if you got a guy like this who seemingly can grow into something more than what he is now on the cheap, I'd just say you keep him. And that's what my decision is for Quentin Grimes, guys. I say that we keep him. Now, this is all under the premise that unless there's a superstar that demands a trade where we have to pretty much include a Quentin Grimes or whoever, what have you, into a deal to, bring into a superstar, then obviously that's a different conversation. But if we're just evaluating players just on what they've done, what they're capable of doing, I'm going to say we keep him for now and see what he does next year. All right, so that's Quentin Grimes. So next we're going to move on to is Mitchell Robinson. Now, Mitch is a homegrown talent. If you remember going back a few years ago, he was selected in the second round of the draft. And we've worked on developing Mitchell Robinson every single year. And he's gotten better every single year. One of the main issues with Mitchell Robinson has been his health, obviously. He's dealt with a lot of injuries in his NBA career, his 4 or 5 year NBA career. But this year in particular, he managed to, stay healthy for the most part. He just had that one stint where he was out for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. But outside of that, Mitchell Robinson was healthy. He was healthy for the playoffs. He had an impressive playoff performance, aside from Miami. And I like Mitch. In this situation with the Knicks team that we have a lot of guys that give us offense. And I know there's a lot of people out there that say that, yeah, Mitch is great on the defense, but he has no offense at all. This is true, right? And this is kind of a problem. We don't really have other, looks that we can go to in terms of, the front court. But again, when you got guys that demand the ball like Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, and even RJ, you need guys that aren't really focused on scoring. And I like the role that Mitchell Robinson has right now. Again, he's our defensive anchor. You take him away from the team, the Knicks are a completely different looking team. And he's a threat out there. Again, a lot of the stuff that he does, yeah, he's a block monster, right? But a lot of times, even when he's not blocking shots, he's intimidating players, right? And he's preventing people from taking shots. You don't see that show up on a stat sheet. So Mitchell Robinson is a very important player for what the Knicks do defensively. Let's take a look now at Mitchell Robinson's strengths and weaknesses. So his strengths, as we know, he's a 7'1" mobile center with great length. He has a 7'4" wingspan and a 9'3" standing reach, so he's a tall guy and long guy. He's a great shot blocker and rim protector. He's a freak athlete, rim runner, and lob threat. Now, in terms of his weaknesses, he has a limited offensive arsenal and shooting range. We know that very well. Poor free throw percentage. I believe this is something that if he did work on, it would improve him tremendously. He often appears exhausted and struggles maintaining energy. We can see time and time again when he's running up and down the floor, he looks like he's about to have a heart attack. He clogs up the lane and the paint, limiting space for shooters. Now, one of my subscribers mentioned this before about potentially moving Mitchell Robinson in a potential DeAndre Ayton deal. And he put up the numbers and said, hey, 18 and 10 is what DeAndre Ayton gives you. And I agree. While that would look great on this team, having a different, option on the offensive end, right, to throw teams off. Defense is still very important. And especially when you have a team that struggles with defense already, you have certain guys that are good defensively sound, but overall as a team, we don't really play great team defense, especially on the perimeter. Mitchell Robinson is roaming everywhere, not just in the paint. He's chasing guys off the perimeter. He's moving everywhere. And if you bring a guy like DeAndre Ayton who plays no defense, that's not going to really, bode well, at least I think, for this team. So in terms of all of that considered, I'm going to make the decision to keep Mitchell Robinson. The only way that I would get rid of Mitchell Robinson, in all honesty, is if Joel Embiid was, a serious conversation in terms of a trade decision. That's the only reason I would give up Mitchell Robinson. So I'm deciding to keep Mitch. So that brings us to RJ Barrett, our third overall pick a few years ago. He is the highest draft lottery pick since Patrick Ewing going number 1. And RJ, while I've, been very vocal about how I feel about RJ, I'm not really sold on his game completely. I think he has a lot that he needs to work on. I think he needs to expand his offense. And, we've been, myself and fans included, have been hammering on RJ in terms of developing a mid-range game. If he just implemented that one thing into his game, it would free up his offensive options a lot. So yes, he has a lot he needs to work on. And while he is a hard worker, right, he manages to get better every single year. He incrementally gets better every single year. I was a little bit concerned about RJ this year in particular because he was very inconsistent this year, right? I believe he had a slightly better three-point percentage last year, and his three-point percentage kind of dropped a little bit this year. And it was a little bit alarming, but all of that was put to bed, honestly, when I seen him in the playoffs this season. Now, again, we only had 2 rounds. We had the round in the first round, obviously, against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And what RJ showed me in the playoffs, I'm like, hey, that's something that we can build off of, right? Because ultimately, you can put up regular season numbers, and that looks glorious and may get you an all-star nod. We'll talk soon about who that player is that does well in the regular season that has difficulty in the playoffs. But if you're able to up your game, elevate your performance in the playoffs, that says a lot about the type of player that you are. And what we've seen in the playoffs, and again, he struggled against Miami, but so did everyone else except for Jalen Brunson. I believe that's something that we need to hold on to. But before we make our decision, let's take a look at RJ's strengths and weaknesses. Now, RJ's strengths, he's a fluid athlete who can play above the rim with impressive body control. He has a strong upper body. He can finish over the top of contested shots. He thrives in a fast-paced offense and is great in transition. It's unfortunate that Thibodeau doesn't implement this more because if he did, that would unlock RJ a little bit further, I believe. Now, in terms of his weaknesses, he needs to work on his touch around the rim. He has limited shooting range, and again, he has absolutely no mid-range game, and he's very inconsistent from the arc and can be turnover prone. All right, so we're very well aware of what RJ's deficiencies are. But again, at least from my vantage point, what I saw him do in the playoffs this year, I'm willing to at least give RJ another year. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to say we keep RJ Barrett with an asterisk, all right? Because if it wasn't for his playoff performance specifically against the Cavaliers, I would have been ready to write RJ off, honestly, right? Not that I don't mind keeping him, but if we want to take it to the next level, he is a prime target to put in a trade to bring back like a superstar player, right? But from what I've seen him do in these playoffs, I'm willing to say, RJ, let's see what you do in the following year, right? If you can elevate your game to another level next year, that looks a lot better. But if it's still the same old inconsistent, no mid-range game, clumsy, clunky, can't really finish at the rim, then I think it may be time for RJ to go. All right. But again, keeping him for now unless he does something else. Now, last but not least, that brings us to Julius Randle. All right. Now, Julius Randle, you have to give credit where credit is due. 2-time All-Star, former Most Improved Player of the Year. He is a nightmare on, a lot of guys in terms of defending because Julius Randle can pretty much score from anywhere. He's like Carmelo in that regard. He doesn't shoot as well as Carmelo did, but Julius can, drive to the hole. He can shoot the three. He has mid-range game. He has decent handles. He can pretty much do it all. He's a very well-rounded player. But what we've seen, as I mentioned with RJ turning it up in the playoffs, Julius Randle has proven, at least in his time with the Knicks, to be the exact opposite. He puts up great regular season numbers. Again, he's a 25-10 guy. He can put up great regular season numbers, but when it comes time for the playoffs, his numbers drop, right? And this is a problem because if we are going to be even sniff at being a championship contending team, that's something that we are sniffing at now, especially with the addition of Jalen Brunson. This is going to be a problem, right? And Julius Randle, going back a few years ago with the playoffs in the first round against Atlanta, he crumbled. This year, although he did have the ankle injury, but I'm not so much ready to write that off as an excuse because if you look at Jimmy Butler was also dealing with an ankle injury, and we see that didn't really affect him in terms of winning. And here's the thing, right? Now, winning is not always about scoring the basketball, right? If you are unable to score, maybe, some days your shot is just not falling, right? There's other ways that you can impact the game to win. You can rebound, you can make the hustle plays, you can make the right pass, act as a decoy. And what I've seen, and I'm sure a lot of fans would agree with me, that when Julius Randle is not scoring, he gets in his own head, he gets frustrated, you can see it in his face, right? It's very obvious. And then he starts making the silliest mistakes, making it incredibly difficult for his teammates to get involved. and all hell just breaks loose, right? So we know what Julius Randle is, right? But let's, again, take a closer look at his strengths objectively and his weaknesses. So in terms of his strengths, again, he's a very versatile offensive threat. He has strong upper body and a high motor. He is effective at creating his own shot. He's probably, outside of Jalen Brunson, the only other Knick that can create his own shot. He has unlimited shooting range. He has great explosion and athleticism. And he can finish at the rim with contact. He's a very strong guy, right? Now, in terms of his weaknesses, he's questionable. He has a very questionable defensive impact. He's turnover prone. He plays defense when he wants to play it, but there's a lot of times where it's like he gets beat on the reads. He's slow to read the defense. He has inconsistent. He's inconsistent with his effort. He has lack of situational awareness. He's he has extreme self-control issues. And he's slow to read defensive schemes. And again, these are all things that don't bode well when it comes time for the playoffs, because when you're in the regular season, right, you're playing this team this night, you're playing this team the next night. So teams don't really got the time to study each other. But when you're in the playoffs, right, you're only playing that one team, and he doesn't really have that, that trick in his bag to overcome adversity. It just seems he's always sticking to his guns, and, he's going to get the ball, he's going to get frustrated, he's going to dribble, do that spin move into a double team, it's turn the ball over, or it gets stolen, and next thing you know, the other team's in transition scoring an easy layup. So these are all problems that we've had with Julius, and, with the Atlanta series, we could have just written that off as like, okay, this is an anomaly. Let's wait until the next time it happens. But the next time just happened. We've seen it happen again. So these are all telling signs of something that can't really be changed. And Julius is not a young guy. He's, in his prime. He's 28 years old, I believe. So you can't teach, the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think Julius Randle is set in his ways. Now, Julius Randle as an individual player is very good. But again, now that we have Jalen Brunson on his team, we need a much more consistent, a more reliable second option. Jalen Brunson is clearly the number one option on this team, right? Which by default brings Julius to the second option. We need much more from that role, right? Now, can Julius give us that? Maybe, but again, I'm just going off of the evidence that we've seen in these last two playoff appearances specifically, and he hasn't gotten the job done. So, this is no secret, guys. I'm going to say my decision, my verdict on Julius Randle is to dump him. We need to get rid of him as soon as possible. Now, a couple of weeks ago, guys, I'm sure you're aware I made my video on, I believe the right move in terms of a trade, bringing in a guy like Draymond Green, a guy who, may not be able to give you the production as a Julius Randle can give you, but he can give you everything else. Looking at his playoff numbers, in playoffs, Draymond Green's numbers go up, right? Now, he's not going to kill you with 20, 30 points a game, but he is a very smart player. He's a champion. He knows how to make winning plays. He affects the game much more than just scoring. And that's what we need from a player in that role. Imagine having Draymond Green in a Knicks uniform as the power forward in that position, right? We will probably be looking at a different series with the Miami Heat, to be all honest, right? But, unfortunately, we can't rewind history. It is what it is. But that's my decision on Julius, guys. It's unfortunate. I think he's been here long enough to show us enough evidence for me to, and a lot of other people, to make this decision. But ultimately, I believe that we should dump him and move on. Now, it's very difficult, again, when you have to make these decisions, because it's not just about evaluating players individually. You have to think about what that's going to do for the team as a whole. And, we gave Julius Randle the extension, so he's obviously on the books for another 3 years. And that's, in some people's eyes, going to be difficult to move him, but especially if he's coming off a poor playoff performance. But I still think 25-10 is still sexy for a lot of teams. So I think he can be moved. It's not going to be like an easy move, but I think it's definitely possible. But that's going to be the end of the video, guys. We're going to do a part 2 to keep and dump him coming up in the next few days. We're going to take a look at the second unit, which I believe is a little bit more interesting. I think, for the starting lineup, they're pretty much set in their ways, and we know what's going to happen. But the reserve unit, when you're talking about guys like Emmanuel Quickly and Obi Toppin, I think it becomes much more interesting. when we're talking about who we should keep or dump. But that's going to be all for today, guys. Again, let me know what you think in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with me? Do you agree that we should keep RJ, we should keep Mitch, we should keep Grimes, and get rid of Julius? Or do you completely disagree with me that you think we should maybe keep everyone, get rid of everyone? We'd love to hear what you guys think. Maybe you can change my mind on a few things. But again, look forward to the second video where we cover the second unit on who we should keep or dump. And don't forget to, like, subscribe, share, and comment on this video, guys. Much appreciated if you did. Catch you in the rebound. Peace.